Hello, everybody, and welcome to another comedian's interview for my blog and podcast, Arichcomiclife. My name is Richard Gill, and my blog describes my experiences of watching over 1,000 comedians and counting over the last 46 years. And my guests today are the fantastic two of the Noise Next Door. Yay!
Yes.
Hello. Hello, Tom. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm glad that you introduced us as the fantastic two of the Noise Next Door. The other two, just not quite as good.
The two of the fantastic Noise Next Door. Hello, Robin. How are you?
Delighted to be here. Thanks for having us. What an applause that was. If every audience could lose their mind in quite the same way, we'd be delighted.
Well, you know, I'm such a fan. I really am. And I'm delighted that you're both here today. The interview is going to last about 45 minutes, something like that. And it's going to be all about your comedy careers. So we're going to go right back to the start. And as I said, it's a pleasure to be talking to the UK's premier improv group. Please tell me how the group got together.
Well, the group started in 2008, a long time ago.
Wow.
In Kent, at the University of Kent in Canterbury. We were a group of friends who'd been doing improvising together as part of sort of drama society on this, just silly little extra shows and things like that. And then one day we were foolishly given money to do an improv gig. And we thought, well, would this happen again? And so we formed the Noise Next Door and decided to head off to Edinburgh. And then the rest is sort of a very long drawn out history where we slowly get slightly more successful over time.
It's been wonderful to watch. Whenever I go specifically to Edinburgh, we always make a point of seeing your late night show. It's such a fantastic end to an evening. It really is. So thank you. I just want to say thank you so much. When was your first ever gig then, and what was it like when you all got together? How did it go? Did you start off in little pubs or something like this?
Yeah, our first gigs. So we'd been performing as part of an improv group at university. But then it was when we first started, there were 5 of us way back when. But it was the 5 of us that were just the most dedicated, and we put the most effort in, and that really came through in the shows as well. So our first gigs were really in student bars. That's when we first started doing it as an improv group. Our first gig is the Noise Next Door. We booked out one of the drama spaces at university just to sort of do it with just the 5 of us to see how it would go, and it went well.
It went well.
Although saying that, obviously, I wasn't actually there for any of this because I'm a bit younger. I joined the group a bit later, and my first gig with the Noise Next Door was in the Manchester Comedy Store. So talk about dropping me in the deep end a little.
Wow! So that would have been a fairly big audience for you to kick off with.
Yeah, I mean, I'd been performing comedy before, just not with the noise, and so and the thought process behind that initially was, to me as the new guy, it seemed crazy. It was like, what are you talking about? Putting me in one of the most prestigious comedy venues in the world, probably for my first gig. But the truth of the matter is that the audience at the Comedy Store are very, very comedy savvy. The bills are always great. So it's built, the venues are built specifically for comedy. So you're going to have a good gig. So now that I've done it a few times, I see the logic. But at the time, I just thought I was working with 3 madmen. So
that's wonderful. You were rightly nominated for the Chortle Comedy Award in 2014. Congratulations on that. Please describe the experience and what are your views on comedy competitions? Do you think they're any good?
It's one of those strange ones, comedy competitions. We were nominated for that one. We've never really put ourselves forward for things. I think there's some strange rules about improv and comedy awards. Certainly, I know the Edinburgh Comedy Awards won't look at improv because it's different every night, and they argue that it has to be the same show that each of the judges are reviewing. So we've got a bit of a strange relationship with it. But hey, if people enjoy it and people get a really good rep off it, there's no harm in them, but it's not something that we've ever sort of sought after. And we're in a bit of a weird subcategory of comedy. So I think we sort of slide past it a little bit.
What about you, Robin? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the Noise Next Door fill an odd space in the comedy world. We are both completely capable and regularly do stand-up comedy nights, and we, you know, close bills of other comedians.
Yeah.
But more and more, I'm finding that we're theatre as well. And so like we generally tour our own theatre show. And that's where I would say, what, Tom, 80% of our work now is probably our own theatre show. And then we occasionally do gigs with other comics and things like that. And so I think that for comedians, for solo stand-ups, I think they can be a great way to begin your career, but it would never have been fully appropriate for us. It's certainly not appropriate for us now because of the space that we fill.
Yeah, I think the great thing about improv though is that every single night you do it, the show's going to be different. So that's the massive attraction, and that can only be popular.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised. Some people, you say the word improv, you have to be quite careful with that word.
Right.
Because some people, it's because of cartoons like Family Guy or, you know, buddy movies with Seth Rogen always make improv look terrible. And that's because, you know, there is a lot of terrible improv, just like there's a lot of terrible stand-up and a lot of terrible theatre.
Yeah.
The form itself isn't terrible. It's just the delivery of it. And so, you know, we've worked for many, many years trying to make ourselves better at what we do. And hopefully now we're at a point where our improv is pretty consistently great. Although, you know, we've just come back after the best part of 2 years off.
Yeah.
And, you know, we all felt the rust. We had to grind that out. But I think we're sort of back to game sharpness now.
I think as well though, the massive plus that you've all got as well is your enthusiasm to entertain an audience when you go out there. Whenever I've seen you, you are always so positive and enthused for it. It's like me writing my blog. I always say to folk, I love to go to a comedy night, and I'm so enthused about it. And it's a very good word to use, because I obviously laugh like a drain, and comedians are going to obviously know I'm there. But I just love to go, and this is what's coming across when I see you. You know, you all love to be there doing what you do, and you enjoy it as well.
Yeah, I think that's one of the lovely things for us as performers, is that every night is different for us as well. If you're a stand-up and you're on the road, you've got, you know, maybe you've got a few hours of material and you're only using 20 minutes a night. But for us, every minute is brand new, and we're making each other laugh, and we're surprising each other, and we're making mistakes. It's a really, our form of performance is really live, and so we really entertain each other and ourselves. So that enthusiasm is genuine, and it's infectious. So the audience then give it back to us, and then we give it back to them, and it's sort of a building enthusiasm tornado.
Brilliant. It is exactly that. Do you have a specific pattern as to who is responsible for which improvised character? So if somebody in the audience, for example, mentioned a policeman, do you have one of the four of you who are brilliant at doing policemen?
Not generally speaking, no. We know what each other's strengths are, and what each other's weaknesses are. But that doesn't really come down to individual characters, because you can make any of us can take any character and then play it the way that we would play it. But for instance, if it's like something, a very niche film reference, for instance, then we know that Matt is the guy for that. Matt's the guy that you want to throw that to, because he'll definitely know it. Tom's really good at sort of world geography, which doesn't sound as sexy as film, but it comes up all the time.
Very useful skill.
Very useful skill.
Of course.
And yeah, so we have different skill sets and different, but in terms of who takes what in characters, no. I think it's probably fair to say, have different strengths when it comes to hosting the games, and we share that out in a slightly different way, because we have different ways of interacting with audiences. So for instance, in the best example of this is, we call it the top. So the first bit that you see when we come out and introduce ourselves, quite often for an adult show, it will be Tom first and me second. So if Tom is off because he's ill or whatever, then I'll do it. And, you know, that's the way that generally works. But if it's a kids show, then we normally flip that, so that I will go first and Tom will go second, because I'm slightly more energetic. I've worked more with kids, and it just plays better to my skill set. So I'd say that with the hosting, we're more, you're best for this, but with the characters, it's much more free flowing. Very
good. I mean, I very recently saw you in Brighton this particular year. The
the open air theatre.
Absolutely wonderful venue. I was sitting there right in your firing line, but you did a brilliant, because it was a family show. You used a brilliant device where you brought out water pistols and played a game. So to have a prop for the audience, especially the kids in the front row, they absolutely loved it, and it elevated that particular. That particular show. I thought it was genius, and I thought Tom's rendition of was it a football manager that you're bringing the audience in, and this is what I was coming on to. You use the audience so well. It's not just, can you give me an idea for this? You actually physically use them all in, and you get them taking part a lot more, which is a wonderful thing to see.
Yeah, we try and use the audience in as many different and unique ways as we can in a show. Since all the COVID stuff, a lot of that's been restricted. We love getting people up on stage, but that's become, we have not been able to do that since COVID. We'll see how things go going forward.
Yeah.
But so we trying to develop different ways of using the audience without us physically interacting with them, and so getting audiences to give ideas without them just answering a basic question, but getting them to sort of participate in different unusual ways. That bit you're talking about with the sports coach. I go out without any idea of what I am the coach of. I just go out and start shouting at the team and get them to respond with how they performed in the first half and how they're going to do it in the second half. And together with the audience, I sort of build up this image of this sport that we must play together. And it's always something bizarre, like you've got to throw the iguana at the target and avoid all the fire. And then, it's just about building up this strange world, and we just sort of build it together. It must sound strange, but it does seem to work in audience.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I've seen you do it 2 or 3 times, and all of them are completely different, yet hilarious. It's really, really funny.
That form was actually part of a series that we did for our previous show, Remix.
That
was just one of 4 characters, so we each did one. So Sam played a child with a balloon, and he just came on stage with a balloon and then gave it somebody in the audience, and we just mucked about with that for a while. I played like a yoga instructor creating a yoga piece with an audience member, and Matt's was, Tom, do you remember what Matt's was by the end? Because he did 2.
It was an interpretive dance, wasn't it? It was.
It was.
Of course. Brilliant.
And that's a good example of knowing each other's strengths. So while an audience suggestion, any of us could take it. Whereas if it's something that we know we're going to do, I will do the authoritative role. Robin will do something silly. Matt will do something physical. Like this, Sam will be mischievous. Those are sort of your basic routes. But
brilliant. Whenever I've seen you, you all appear to be very confident and fearless on stage. Do you suffer from any nerves beforehand? And if so, how do you cope with them?
Sometimes, rarely now. I think when we do an especially enormous gig, that's nerve-wracking, and you cope with that by saying to yourselves, we do this day in, day out. The amount of people doesn't matter. Like, so for instance, when we did our Britain's Got Talent piece, which sadly we had to cancel because of COVID, we ended up, like, before that we were all a bit nervous because it was like 9 million people watching. But when we walked out on stage, as soon as we were nervous before we got on stage, but as soon as we got on stage, it was like, well, this is just work. We're just at the office now. This is easy. The other time I suppose we sort of feel nervous would be the wrong word, but apprehensive is when you arrive at a gig, often a corporate sort of performance or something like that. And actually, increasingly in COVID, it happens more often because the spaces are unusual. But you arrive at a space and you go, well, this is terrible. Like, this space is not built well for comedy. So a great example of this is actually before my time, but a gig where there was a Formula One car between the audience and the stage. And you just go, well, that's terrible. Of course it's terrible. Ask a comedian, ask a performer, and we'll tell you that's terrible. I think we all feel apprehensive when we rock up at things like that, but we just go out there and give it our absolute best. There's a story of a comedian, a really great comedian that we know. I won't name names because it involves him dying a death on stage.
Wow.
Like, really tanking. However, he sold it like he was like sold out Wembley. And it was, and I remember that's a real lesson for me is if you've given everything you've got and they've not enjoyed it, then either you've mucked it up and you've not had a good gig, which happens, or it's something external that, like, maybe if you're doing, I don't know, like a corporate event where they're all getting smashed, maybe they just don't want to watch comedy. Maybe they want to get smashed. And it happens.
Yeah.
So I don't think nerves are a huge problem for us, but that's how we sort of deal with it, I think.
It's interesting because other than my blog, the most creative thing I ever did, I wrote a play which I was going to take up to Edinburgh, the Edinburgh Fringe. But me and my mate put it on for comic relief, and we raised over $2,000 for it. And it's called, thank you, and it's called, the play's called The Applicant. Very quickly, it's about me who coming down from Carlisle to London. And I have a very successful girlfriend in London, and I go for a number of jobs, and I've never been for a job interview. So each scene is me attending a job interview. My friend is all the interviewers because he was very good at accents and voices, and I'm me. And as it increases, I get given my ideal job, and the last interview I get, I die, and I go to heaven, and they say, whoever's up there says, we've been watching you on planet Earth, and we think we think you'd be brilliant at interviewing corpses for heaven or hell. And I shrugged my shoulders, and that's the end of the play. It was a long time ago, but there we are. But each scene, I wrote a monologue, and then there was an interview. So the monologue was me in the waiting room, terrified, and chatting to the audience and sent this monologue up. And the point of the tale is, the first night I did it, I ran out having written the whole thing, and I completely forgot the monologue, and I was like a rabbit in headlights. Do you ever forget scenes? Do you ever? I'm guessing you're so good at what you do that people can't see the fact that you're because you're enjoying it again so much. Is there an answer to this, or is there a question to this? Is there an answer to this? Or?
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah,
because obviously everything we do on stage is made up.
Yeah,
forgetting is hard. But the thing we can forget is the structure of the show. So
right.
Before the show, we'll all agree, okay, in this first half, we're going to do this song, then this game, then this game, then this song, and then you're going to do this bit. Obviously, what happens within those sections is made up. But sometimes whoever's job it is to host one of the sections might forget. But most of us will notice it's happened, and one of the other ones quickly steps in. I would like to think the audience would rarely notice us forgetting something. Yeah, rarely, but not always.
Yeah, it's rare. That's one of the things that we have to take quite seriously, is that initial host, that making sure that you seem professional as a unit is vital for improv. Because if you seem like you're a bit bumbling, you don't really know what you're doing in that first instance, then people think that everything that comes after that is you don't know what you're doing, you're just mucking about. It's quite important that you get that really, really right. However, once you've won them over, because as Tom says, hopefully it's very rare that we do forget anything. If somebody forgets something and we drop the ball and it's obvious, we can normally get away with that once. You can get away with that once in a show because you've won them over. They're all you, but you can't do it twice. So we're very careful not to do it unless it's a genuine accident. Like, in some plays and some comedians and stuff, they sort of set up bits where they're going to get it wrong. They corpse on purpose. We never do that, because if we actually need it, it's really important we've not burnt that already.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I think our equivalent for the sort of forgetting thing is that if a suggestion comes up that we genuinely know nothing about. So if we ask the audience for, it happened literally last night, we asked the audience for a TV show, and someone shouted out Cagney and Lacey. And Matt and I, who were in the scene, I looked at him and I saw his eyes go wide. I thought, no, he knows nothing. And I knew nothing. I literally nothing, knew nothing about it. And so the scene was us going, well, Cagney, we are policemen, I think, maybe. And the audience was like, yeah. And one of us is a woman. You're both women. You're both women. And it fell apart. But luckily we'd gone far enough into the show that they kind of forgave us that. It can happen. When you're asking the audience to shout at anything, on the list of everything in the world, there are some things we don't know anything about. And the Cagney and Lacey is no longer one of them. I've Googled it since, and I've got an episode downloaded to watch.
Oh, brilliant. That is a great answer. You've performed alongside, amongst others, Al Murray, Harry Hill, and Michael McIntyre. Describe what it was like working with these other comedians. Were you supporting them, or were you working with them?
Yeah, I mean, we've been very lucky to work alongside lots of great comics over the years. With those three in particular, I mean, they're sort of like, big stars, long-standing stars. In each of those cases, we were supporting them at a gig. Yes, so not as a sort of tour, but on a sort of one-off on a charity event or something like that, or a strange little one-off gig. And across the board, they were all very nice. Michael McIntyre was actually particularly very kind and really supportive and really lovely about what we'd done. Yeah. And then obviously he went on and was absolutely amazing as well, and the audience lost their minds. We've been really fortunate to work with sort of people like that. We've also, because as you know, in our late night show in Edinburgh, we do shows with guests, so we bring them on. Yeah. Although we've not quite had Michael McIntyre, we have had a lot of people. We've had Joe Lycett, Catherine Ryan, Ramesh Ranganathan, Milton Jones, Tim Vine, lots of like big stars. Laura Lex, just saying. So we've had lots of big stars on with us, and it's great to work with them, and it's lovely to what we do in that show. We take stand-ups, they can do a little bit of stand-up, but then they join us in improv games. So it's been really fun to work with them, a little bit out of their element, and the audience gets to see another side to one of their favorite stand-ups. Brilliant
answer. Let's go on to Edinburgh. What was your first Edinburgh Fringe like? I'm very fortunate to be able to go to Edinburgh every year, and it's my holiday. I go for a week and I see about 50 shows, including yours, and I'm exhausted by the end of it, but I have the time of my life. What was your first Edinburgh Fringe like? What was the first year you went? What was it like? What was the experience like?
Well, as a personal or for work, I suppose there's two answers there.
Both, yeah.
The first time I ever went to the Edinburgh Fringe was in 2004 or 5, I think 2005. And I went up to Edinburgh with a tiny little show that was being put on by drama students from Birmingham University. I did not go to Birmingham University, but I had gone to school with someone who then went to Birmingham University, and they didn't have anywhere near enough boys that wanted to do it was like a kids show. And so she'd put together this show at Birmingham University and had all these girls that were really excited to do it, but they just needed at least one man to be this main part in it. And so she contacted me during the last term of my first year of university and was like, would you like to come and work at Birmingham University for a month and then go out to Edinburgh? So I was like, yeah, of course. So I had a strange one. It was just me and 12 girls did a kid show called Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And it was fine, I guess. But the experience was amazing. And I've been every year since.
Of course. Yeah. What about you, Robin?
Also, not The Noise Next Door. It's interesting. I think if you'd have asked Matt, his answer would have been, well, my first time was with The Noise Next Door. But I went up with, this would have been in 2011 or 12. I was in a group called the 3 Half Pints. We were a slapstick comedy trio, and we went up with a show just called the 3 Half Pints, and we performed in a venue which later, when I told comedian Ian Sterling about it, he went, well, that's not really in Edinburgh, is it, boys? Because it's so far. It was at the Edinburgh City Football Club, which is so far. It's almost in Leith. It's a long way away.
Well, I'll give you this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we did an hour show of sketches and slapstick in like a bar. And again, just like Tom said, like the show we were thrilled with. We got like 5-star reviews for it, which was delightful, and sort of like the first tick in our box of like maybe we're good enough to be performers.
Yeah.
And then I went. I think I've been every year since, either as a customer. A couple of years I went just to see things, or as a performer, either with the Half Pints or with the Noise. So,
what was the Noise Next Door's first solo show?
The Noise Next Door's first show in Edinburgh was 2008. It was called The Noise Next Door in Prophecy Chronicles. And the conceit of the show was about predicting the future of the audience through improv. That was the basic idea behind it. And it was in a little venue which doesn't exist anymore. It was on Northbridge, I think it's called.
Right.
It was like in a sort of dingy back room of some hotel. It was quite central, which we were very happy with. We sort of didn't know how central it was when we were applying. It was a C Venues venue that they don't run anymore.
Yeah.
And it was lovely and central. And I honestly think I really put down a lot of our success at the Noise down to that first year, where we would go out at midday every day and we would flyer non-stop until 7:30 in the evening. Like there would always be from midday to 7:30, there would always be one of us on the mile flyering, if not all of us, or we were doing gigs. And we packed out our first ever Edinburgh show, not because we were anyone, but because we were blindly enthusiastic. We were all 21 and we had stamina for days. So we'd fly for 8 hours, perform for an hour, and then go and get drunk until 4 a.m. and do it all again.
I still do that.
Oh, you've got better energy than I do. Yeah, but we sold that show out a lot of times based on just please come, and we would walk people to the box office. Literally go the box office this way. I'll take you right there, and we talk to them until they bought a ticket. We were nice.
Exactly that, but that's the magic of it, because the flyering may seem a very long, laborious process, but of course it works because you get people in. And then you do your show, and it's this enthusiasm again. Let me just read you this next question, because these are all the shows that I've seen. As well as making a point of seeing you annually at the Edinburgh Fringe for the Noise Next Door's comedy lock-in in the late night show, including celebrating 10 years in 2017, congratulations. I have also seen your brilliant tours, Noise in the Hood in London in 2016 and Remix in Carlisle in 2019, as well as shows at the Underbelly Festival and Always Be Comedy in London. Do each of you have specific routines ready based on audience suggestions, even although it's an improvised show? It's similar to the ones with the characters, but do you have, if somebody mentions a word, you've got a stock routine in your mind, or is it so fly off the wall that's half the fun of it?
It's fly off the wall. The trouble with doing it the way that you're suggesting, sort of the way that you're questioning if we do, is that's a lot of work. Having jokes and routines, and it's just a pain, and none of us can be bothered. So of course there are some characters who come up often. Until quite recently, I'm pleased to say he has died a death recently, but Donald Trump was a real guarantee. And so yes, there are, after a while, you run out of new jokes, and you start going, what else can we do about this horrible bigot? Like you just run out.
Yeah, awful.
And so by the end of Donald Trump years, there were like 10 jokes that we knew worked. But what you do then is you do them and you get them out of the way, so that you can move on to the more interesting creative. But broadly, no. There are too many available jokes, and also, more importantly for us, there are too many available combinations. So we might have heard Henry VIII before, but we've never heard Henry VIII, who is now a shoe shiner. That's a new thing. And so you've got to marry those ideas, and the most satisfying jokes for improv come from when you've married those ideas properly. You can do Henry VIII jokes and you can do shoe shiner jokes, but if you can do a joke that is about Henry VIII shining shoes that wouldn't work for anybody else, then that is where you're going to get your absolute gold laughs. So we try to not fall into the trap of having reliable gags, because it's less good. Yeah,
sure. Do you agree with that, Tom?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where there's no sort of like master document of things we could say. Like Robin said, if stuff comes up a lot, it's impossible not to recall what you've done recently and what was successful. And so, Donald Trump's a great example. It comes up a lot, and so it is easy to parrot out jokes that we've done before, or versions of jokes we've done before. But honestly, that's the least satisfying version of what we do for us. When someone comes out of left field and hits us with a Cagney and Lacey, that's when we're really flying. If someone suddenly brings up some topic that we haven't thought about in a long time, it's like, the Crystal Maze. I haven't thought about the Crystal Maze in ever. And then suddenly you've got this fun scene that's as fun for us as it is for the audience, because it's true discovery. So there's no master list, but it would be untrue of us to say we never repeat a joke. We certainly do, but only if that's what the audience want to see. It would be churlish of us to to go, well, we did Donald Trump yesterday, so we're not going to do the same jokes for you because our job is to entertain the audience. So yeah, sometimes we'll repeat a joke, but not because we want to, but because the audience have asked for the same thing.
Yeah. I want to say this next bit to you because the group are very, very close to my heart because when I saw you in Carlisle, I was not in a very good place. I lost my mum and I was very low. And my brother said to me, go to your comedy. And you were, the noise next door were playing at the old fire station in Carlisle. And I went along on my own and I sat in the back with a pint of beer in the back of the audience. And you all banged on and you said, hello, Carlisle. Can anybody give me something good about Carlisle? And somebody yelled out Carlisle United. And then what I didn't realize was a friend of mine was in the audience and you then said, can you just give me something bad about Carlisle? And somebody yelled out Richard Gill. And you all went, is he here? He's normally in London. And literally with my pint, I went, hello. But then you incorporated all the information, as you say, off the cuff into this amazing song about Carlisle. And I will never forget that for cheering me up so much in such a dark time. So thank you very, very much. You are wonderful at what you do. Let's move on. You've appeared on TV, on both BBC One, BBC Three and ITV, and on Radio 1 and Radio 4. Does appearing on TV and radio limit your improvisational skills at all?
Well, we don't do it very much, Richard, and I think that's.
So no, then
there is a. I think this is probably fair, and listen, it would be easy to be bitter about this, but I don't think we are. We're very aware that we're an incredibly tight live product, and we enjoy live work. It would be lovely to do more TV work, but there's a reticence amongst TV producers because of the word improv. They're terrified that we're going to go out and just suddenly, despite years of never doing this, just suddenly decide, oh, we're going to do a really good neo-Nazi bit, or we're going to do, there's a real fear there, I think. So I would say, no, it wouldn't limit our improv skills, but we're quite good at reading a room, and we're not going to go on and do something incredibly offensive. We wouldn't do a neo-Nazi bit for any audience. But, you know, the material that we would do at 3 a.m. in the Comedy Store is going to be very different to what we would do at 12 p.m. at the Brighton Open Air Theatre.
Of course.
So I think it would only limit us because of the way that we would want to perform it. We would be aware of the form and the style. So, for instance, on Britain's Got Talent, we know that's a family show. We're not going to go out there and do a terribly rude song because A, we would lose the show. B, we would never go on TV again. And C, the audience who are watching it aren't going to enjoy that. So that's sort of like our entire vibe really is like reading what the audience wants and giving it to them. I think the only reason we're limited on TV is because of that limit, which we're happy to abide by, I think.
Sure. Have you got anything to add, Tom?
Very conclusive answer, in my opinion. That we've really enjoyed the TV appearances we have had, few and far between though they've been. We would definitely love to do more, but like Robin said, we're aware of how live our product is. It's all about interacting with the audience, and we touched on it briefly earlier. But we took part in Britain's Got Talent in 2020. And had a lovely first round audition and got 4 yeses, and were due to go to a semi-final. But then when all the live audiences were taken away and it was done with screens and all got delayed, we made the decision that it wouldn't be representative of our show and what we want to do to do it. They wanted it to be more reliable and tight with no live audience, and we couldn't promise them that and do our show properly. So we had to back out. So yeah.
And I think we're unapologetic about that. Like, we are an improvised comedy group. We don't want to be a stand-up group. We're an improvised comedy group. We're not a sketch group. And we don't want, like, if that's not suitable for the television audience, then that's absolutely fine. We're not going to change the thing that we love doing and the thing that the company has built up a reputation for and skill set in order to fit into something that maybe the form isn't right for. Hence the reason that, like I said earlier, we're doing way more theatre now. So we're doing loads of big theatres and we're touring way more. And that would be a way that we could develop our skills and change what we do. And, you know, we could start thinking more about different live formats and ways that the Noise Next Door can do other live stuff, because that plays into the skill set we already have. but we're sort of unapologetically not going to change the way that we perform, I think is
too right. I totally agree with you. I think it's the originality and the fear of not of no barriers that make you very, very special. You can go and do what you want and say what you want, but a very, as I said before, very warm and enthusiastic with it. Who are your favorite comedians, past and present? Do you have any other favorite comedians at all? Do you like comedy?
One thing I would say, and I bet you probably get this a lot with people you speak to, is that when you work in comedy, you watch far less of it than you used to.
Yeah.
I go to comedy all the time, and now that it's my work life, I'm less attracted to it. Although, having said that, I still do have favorite comedians. I love Ramesh Ranganathan. I think he's
brilliant.
Incredible. I love James Acaster. He makes me James Acaster makes me laugh in a way that nobody else does. And if you're looking sort of a bit further back, I really like. I mean, he's sort of semi-retired now, but Lee Evans was a.
It was the visual humour, wasn't it? The funny face at the end of every gag. Yeah.
And sort of more recently, Maisie Adam as well.
Oh, she's superb.
I really admire and think she's hilarious. So those would be my four that I really take home.
What about you, Tom?
I think I do enjoy live comedy. Certainly, James Acaster is certainly one that really, really tickles me. And a lot of other like modern stand-ups who I really love. Alistair Beckett-King is a real. He's on the way up at the moment. And he really touches my funny bone. I think where I kind of came into comedy was much more through sort of scripted and sketch and things like that, like Monty Python, old school Monty Python stuff. It sounds strange now, but South Park, the writing of South Park in the noughties was so exciting and outrageous to me that that sort of thing was how I got into wanting to be involved in comedy. And there's a bit more storytelling, a bit more narrative, which is a bit more my style on stage as well.
Yeah.
We also have sort of, I suppose, as a group, we have one comedian who always gets special mention for us, merely because we talk about him so much in the car. We're always talking about, have you ever seen Kerry Marks?
He's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant.
We talk about Kerry Marks more than any other comedian. We talk about him all the time.
He's so funny. Yeah.
And honestly responsible for probably the most I've ever laughed in a dressing
room. Yeah.
On one, and Kerry Marks gets special mention from the Noise Next Door for sure.
I saw him 2 or 3 times downstairs at the King's Head. He used to play all the time. And it's interesting you say about James Acaster. I think he's one of the best. And I have a testimonial section in my blog, and he very kindly said, if I wasn't a stand-up comedian, I would happily sit next to Richard Gill all day, making him laugh. And I thought that was genius. And I thought, well, you can't get better than that. Just following on from that, like me, do you go to a lot of gigs as a member of the audience?
Not loads anymore.
Oh, really? No.
I go to the theatre quite often, and I see music quite often. I do see some, but I would say before I was in the Noise, I would go to 10 or 15 gigs a year, nowhere near your level, but 10 or 15 gigs a year. Now I'm in the Noise, it'll be. I mean, if I'm not in Edinburgh, 3 or 4. If I'm in Edinburgh, I'll see a lot more, normally 10 or 15 shows in Edinburgh. But it's just because you want to get away from that environment a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it's also that, again, I don't, outside of work, and also at work, we'll often see a lot of stand-up. If we're at a mixed bill gig, we'll get to see a great lineup of stand-ups. And so the desire to then do that again outside of work is sort of, no matter how much you love your job,
too much. You
want to have a day off from it, no matter what it is.
Yeah. My first ever gig, I was 7. We went to Scarborough as a family, and we went to see Les Dawson, and he was amazing. And then a year later, we saw Tommy Cooper, and that was incredible. And I just got the bug for it.
If I could turn back time, and see anybody live, anybody throughout the history, bands, anything, I would see Tommy Cooper.
Tommy Cooper was amazing. The curtains opened up, and there's a bed on stage, and he's lying on it, and one woman in the audience starts laughing. It trickles round, so everybody's laughing, crying with laughter. He hadn't done a thing, and he just popped his head up, perfect timing, and went, what, has somebody come on? And he was away, The ones I would have loved to have seen were Morecambe and Wise.
Oh,
They're the reason why I write comedy. But I got through the alternative boom in the 80s. I went. I saw. I couldn't believe. I went to see Frank Skinner, French and Saunders, Rick Mail, on and on and on, and then of course Edinburgh with all the big shows. I just love to go. I just go and enjoy myself. It's obviously my passion. How have you found online gigs as opposed to live gigs? Have you done any online gigs? What do you think the future is for stand-up comedy?
We did do quite a few online gigs.
Yeah.
We were during the first lockdown. The rules were pretty clear. The four of us were unable to meet up and do anything, and so we did try a few gigs where we were in separate places, but frankly the technology was not quick enough. We didn't have quick enough interactions. We realized quickly that this wasn't for us, especially for sort of comedy gigs. We actually did do a socially distanced weekly show, but that was much more of a friendly sort of...
I saw one or two of those. Yeah.
You know, a friendly interaction where we do a bit of improv, but it was a lot more just messing around and setting challenges, which was really fun to do. For the, I think, second, third, and fourth, however many other lockdowns there were, from a certain point, you could meet up to perform as long as there was no live audience, and we were in a sort of work bubble. And so the four of us from second lockdown onwards could meet up and perform to an audience over Zoom, and those worked quite well. There was a real shift to learn not to leave gaps for laughter, even though. Yes, people probably were laughing. You couldn't rely on that, and you couldn't judge an audience based on that. We were taking all our suggestions just through the chat function in Zoom, because having 50 people all trying to shout out over Zoom is not the same as a room full of 50 people trying to shout out.
Yeah.
So we found our way, and by the end of it, we actually found a pretty good setup. You know, we had full lights and mics, and you know, my living room became our studio over the summer. And we're still doing a few gigs for certain companies. There are certain corporate companies that we work with who are continuing to keep the gigs online because frankly it's much cheaper and almost as effective for them for us to do it online as it is in real life.
Yeah. Why not?
But sort of as for the future, like you said, I think that it will die. I think that online comedy will disappear because nobody who does it enjoys doing it as much. I think, as Tom said, corporate stuff will last for longer because the bookers will want it. It's cheaper for companies to put on. So we did, for instance, for a very, very large retail company, we did a gig to over 10,000 people. They could never do that in real life. That would be like what, £100,000 easily. Whereas doing it online, they just need to send out a link and have a subscription big enough, and that's it. That's the only overheads. So I think for companies, I can see it remaining for longer.
Sure.
But I think in terms of just online gigs, I think they'll die. In fact, we've actually noticed the appetite from audiences has dropped off as things open. People want to be out in the world. Watching things on screen that are filmed and created for that purpose. So films or TV series or whatever. Whereas stand-up isn't meant to be viewed in that way. It's meant to be a live experience. And if you're watching it on TV, it's a filmed live experience, which is slightly different. So I don't think that it will continue.
I totally agree with that. I mean, when lockdown was on, I would go every night and online, and I would love to go. It was a very good substitute for live comedy. But when they first started, they didn't have any audio. They couldn't work out the audio. So I was sitting here laughing at a screen. It was like laughing at four walls. I thought I was going to be taken away because I was laughing so loud and they couldn't hear me. But I'm like you. I love to go on a weekend or whenever live and go with a load of friends and just sit there and just get the act to entertain me, because you're in the moment live as well. So anything can happen, and it's so much better. And it's wonderful to see coming back. Just before we go, and I could talk to you all night. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you so much. You've been fantastic guests. Is there anything else you'd like to say Do you have any live or online tours coming up, or do you have any podcasts that you want to mention, or where can people find you on social media, that sort of thing?
Well, I guess we'll split them. I'll do the tour. Yeah, we're on tour. We're touring again from now. Actually, we've started again, which we're delighted about. And you can catch us all over the country, from the Isle of Wight all the way up to Warrington, I think, is as far north as we're going this time. But hopefully more dates will be coming in. So if you live in a part of the world that we're not in, we'll be there eventually. Keep your eyes
out. Brilliant. And
Tom? Yeah, the best way to find out about that tour is to either check out our website, thenoisenextdoor.co.uk, or follow us on social media at Noise Next Door on everything. So yeah, do check us out. And if you'd like to listen to more of Robin and I talking, but also with additional Sam and Matt, we do have a podcast. It's called Fantasy 5, and we make up football teams out of things that have no footballers in. So maybe historical queens versus cartoon dogs. It's that sort of thing. It's basically nonsense, but it's a lot of fun.
Brilliant. Well, I, for one, am really looking forward to seeing you again live very, very soon. And as I say, thank you so much for being fantastic guests. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and all the very best to you. Thanks a lot now.
Cheers. Bye-bye.